let's take a look at the first area. So we're going to focus in on cloud, mobile, and indeed smart technologies. So really, cloud computing first. In terms of the definition here, let's take a look. Really what we're talking about is the sharing of resources, both physical and indeed virtual, via the internet, rather than having the sort of traditional style, sort of locally based systems. Gmail would be a good example, for example, of a hosting service or any sort of email function. iCloud, etc. So there's cloud and cloud hosting services. Moving on from there, when we think about SaaS, we're talking about sort of applications accessed via a central server, hosted on a central server. And indeed, linked into that, when we think about infrastructure, we're going the whole hog. We're talking about a complete infrastructure for a business, the architecture of a customer's systems, in effect being housed in the cloud and accessed over the internet. Taking that a step further, when we think of programmers using applications that can be accessed via the cloud, we're talking about a platform as a service. Moving on from there, when we think of the sort of trade-off, if you will, in other words, a consideration of whether or not we should use, let's say, a cloud-based service as a business, or indeed a traditional service, in-house IaaS IT on the ground. Several things to consider, not least cost, obviously. I mean, costs vary, and the requirements of each company, each organization are going to be different. Certainly, cash flow is relevant because there will be sort of maintenance costs and indeed ongoing costs. So companies need to factor that into their consideration. Linked into that, companies will grow. There'll be changing needs over time. So a decision at the outset needs to consider perhaps how the company will change. Linked into that, this is an important issue, and we'll see this recur throughout this particular video. The whole idea of involving a third party, in effect, in your business in an important area, IT and IaaS. Security is certainly relevant. I mean, the flip side of that is that generally speaking, cloud service providers, hosting companies, etc., will have security systems that are probably better than most. Next area is obviously the selection of the supplier. Many companies offering some form of cloud system or cloud hosting system, or possibly SaaS. So some research is required. In addition to the speed. So the speed of access is important, and that would be sort of geared in one sense to the ISP. So those are the considerations if we're looking at the toss-up between a traditional style system, i.e. in-house in effect, and using some sort of cloud-based system. Next area for us is, benefits. I mean, what would be the main benefits? Well, clearly flexibility. I mean, cloud hosting systems and companies that offer this can really allow you to scale in any way you want and to be as flexible as you need. Linked into that, obviously, is the ease. It's generally sort of plug and play, as opposed to using traditional based systems when you'll have to buy in IT, IaaS, etc. There'll be a setup phase. Operations won't run as quickly as you might hope. The idea of using some sort of cloud-based systems, you're basically going to be plug and play. Across the board, I would say that cost is also a definite consideration. Because businesses that offer these sorts of services, whether or not it's PaaS or IaaS or ASS, we're talking about businesses that can really cover their cost and split their costs over many different customers. So cost is definitely something that should come down with the use of these types of cloud systems. Over and above that, certainly you're dealing with experts. It's as if you're sort of outsourcing one key function in your business. So the chances are that their expertise is going to affect the reliability of your systems. And indeed, these cloud hosting companies and cloud service, etc., can't afford for their systems to go down. So they have to make sure that they're bulletproof. But all is not good. There are some flip sides to this in terms of disadvantages, risks. On the one hand, we mentioned up top about the idea of most likely a better and more secure environment. There is still the issue of you housing confidential, important information, and indeed relying on a third party outside your business. In the same way, you're fully reliant on another person's business to run your business, depending upon the extent to which you use the cloud as an alternative to traditional systems. If we get outages in any way, for whatever reason, either the cloud service provider's systems go down or for some other reason, electric, et cetera, then you've got a major problem. Linked into that, there's the question of, who owns the property? I mean, in one sense, it's your property, but it is housed elsewhere. So IP may be an issue in some way, shape, or form. Now, when we think about mobile technology, I mean, obviously, we're talking about anything from, in terms of the definition here, anything from a smartphone through to a tablet of some kind. Really, a device, a communications device that's intended for portable use, where the network or network comms that connects this device will be, for example, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, etc. So really, the use of mobile devices, certainly within business, has become more and more common. And certainly in terms of key benefits, flexibility and indeed portability is something that's high on the list. In addition to that, in effect, I guess you've got 24/7 access via a smartphone, via a tablet. You're constantly connected. Third point is the development of apps and indeed services. This area continues to grow and grow and grow, thus making businesses potentially more efficient and effective. Apps really for everything. In addition to that, and indeed linked to that, clearly the idea of being able to network with multiple employees at the same time through whatever device it is, a mobile phone, through Zoom, tablet, etc., is clearly a distinct benefit as well. But as with the above, with every sort of sunshine comes a cloud. There are absolutely some risks to mobile technology, perhaps more so than broadly cloud computing. First things first is distraction. The idea, let's say, that a group of employees or an individual is constantly available, let's say, via WhatsApp or email, etc. And one would be concerned, I guess, in one way about, well-being and indeed health. People are constantly on the phone. They may be constantly working. Outside of that, certainly security risk, because we're talking about devices that go anywhere. They are mobile. A phone, for example, is easy to lose, or it's easy for someone else to pick up, and it may well be that that phone contains key confidential information about the business. So there are some, serious risks, security risks associated with mobile devices. That is for sure. When we think about smart technology, let's just take a look at what we mean in terms of sort of examples. That's in the cut and paste here. So as we said up top, I guess mobile technology creates the advantage, or many advantages, and indeed some disadvantages. When we think of connected devices, products with a real-world function that is connected to the internet and indeed transmit and to be controlled remotely. So that could be as simple as your mobile phone and your home heating system. Smart devices, as we said up top when we talked about sort of smartphones, etc., certainly designed to make users' life easier. They certainly have some kind of intelligent behavior that enables them to react to real-world situations and even predict the needs of their users. I mean, the reference to, for example, a telephone or a home heating system might be one. An IoT device, in effect, is just part of that massive network of connected devices, be they phones, tablets, etc., that simply collect and indeed exchange data. So smart technology becoming more and more relevant to our lives. In terms of the benefits of smart technology, certainly, improving work processes across the board. Secondly, making people and indeed processes and devices much more efficient. Over and above that, the potential for problem monitoring, and indeed, final point, really allowing businesses to think in different ways, perhaps about possible strategies forward, using this sort of technology. As with everything, though, the risks are always there. Certainly, as we've said up top, security risks pervade this area. Next point that we haven't really mentioned in any detail, but could have perhaps, is data protection. Where you've got a multitude of different devices and indeed connected devices, the possibility of data protection regulations, whether it's DPR or anything else, being breached is probably much, much higher, because these devices will hold perhaps on their CPUs or be accessing personal information, privileged information, confidential information. In addition to that, there's certainly the possibility over time that storage costs and processing costs may increase. We only have to see that with some of the offerings, for example, through iCloud and indeed Gmail, etc. In terms of the options or the opportunities, if you will, that sort of technology or new technology, be it cloud, smart, mobile, etc., provides companies with. And sort of two main areas here. The first area is a term that we're familiar with, cost leadership. So this comes obviously from Porter's generic strategies and the suggestion by Porter that businesses have a couple of different ways where they can seek competitive advantage. What cost leadership means in this particular sense is simply the idea of being the lowest cost provider or the lowest cost producer. What differentiation means is uniqueness. In other words, some sort of premium service, some sort of unique service that is probably charged at a high price to give the seller that additional high margin.